Nini once again, everybody. Here's that other article I was talking about. And this one's kind of interesting. It's titled My Paganism is Political. Lucius Svartwolf Helson. I think he's a heathen. Excuse me. But he is quoting somebody here. I'm going to have to take a look at this article, but I'll make sure to put that all my stuff in the comments. I think I forgot to put the first article in my first video, but I'll make sure to do that in this one. So I'm gonna have to take a look at this one because Gods of a Radical. I think that's a different article that he's referring to. In any case, so there's been a lot of talk about political paganism, and some people have come out and said, I can't imagine my paganism not being political. It informs all my political choices, or words to that effect. I often find this ironic because the vast majority of their political choices look like those of people who have nothing to do with paganism and often go against fundamental philosophies, both religious and political, from when their gods were most prominently worshipped. Still, this is not a post about who's practicing the right politics based on their religion. This is about making their religion political because they view their politics religiously. And I think this is an interesting idea. The perspectives of the ancients, whether they be European or Egyptian, African, Asian, and elsewhere, they definitely didn't have the same views about politics as we do today, especially in the Western world. I mean, say for the Greeks, perhaps, a lot of these other societies didn't have anything in terms of democracy going on. So, that is definitely a thought. And that's another interesting thing, too, viewing your politics religiously. Whoops. But I did mention that in the other video, people inserting politics into their religion, and instead of having their religion inform or inspire them in the political sphere. So hopefully he'll go into this a little bit more. I'm a rather amoral motherfucker, and I'm pretty religious in the sense that I am devoutly faithful to certain gods and goddesses, not a frequent practitioner of rites, and I'm pretty political. But one of the things I do not mix is my politics and my religion. Why? Because I live in a nation that believes church and state should be separate, and I'm a legalist, so I obey the spirit of that law. I also try to keep them separate because while political philosophies change, like the directions of tumbleweeds in the wind, religious teaching should have a bit of the immutable in them, and the will of the gods is not something subjective to the whims of whoever holds political power at the time, or at least it shouldn't be. Yeah, that's another thing, inserting, what did he say? Church and state, separation of church and state, because it's good when, you're a pagan and you have leftist, liberal, kind of progressive views, but what about the Christian who decides that, homosexuals shouldn't get married, or, women shouldn't have a legal right to abortion, and they're using their own religious views in order to inform those political leanings. Is that okay? Why is it okay for you to have your leftist or progressive views based on paganism, and they can't have their conservative views based on Christianity? But in any case, yeah, and that's true too about religious teachings being more timeless rather than, politics following more contemporary topics and teachings and thoughts. The other and primary part of it, though, is that I like to practice a form of real politic when it comes to my politics. And religious teachings are not always best at a real politic style of politics. I'm not saying this because a lot of political pagans who have managed to get their voices heard, preach Marxism, which is unrealistic politic for sure. But a lot of the values enshrined in the spirit of my home nation are not always the same values of my religion. And if I made the political values of my religion the basis of my politics, well, I'd probably be where a lot of those guys are, insisting that everything in civilization be torn down to form a nation under the politics of my religion. And oh my gosh, that hits the nail right on the head, because a lot of these ancient pagan traditions, regardless of where they come from, uh, they don't have the same values or beliefs that a lot of, modern day nations have. Like in ancient Egypt, there was no separation of church and state. There was a pharaoh who was the head of the state religion. Whatever he said, or he was supposed to be a god on earth, and whatever he said went. We don't have that today. We have a democratic republic here in the United States, at least, and we vote who we want to lead our country. That would have been completely unheard of in ancient Egypt. So, when people are saying, oh, my Egyptian or my Kemetic beliefs, inform my religion or inform my politics, it's like, huh? Because, especially if you're a Reconstructionist, then, obviously that wouldn't make any sense. It's like, i.e., a theocracy. That's what it was way back in the day. It was a theocracy. Yeah, which frequently sounds like a lot of work that none of my goddesses are insisting I do, although I think Bellona would probably be pretty happy if I did. Oh, that's interesting. Don't know much about that, but it's like, huh? One thing that strikes me as both hilarious and slightly odd about most of the people you see insisting the pagan be political, or that their paganism is political, is that they are perfectly fine with politics and religions being joined together, so long as it is their politics in control of the joining. One only need look at the recent Screamfest that happened when a Chief Gothi Math Flavel of the AFA posted this to understand. And I don't know if I can I? Oh, I can. Not all in such an organization can be judged by leadership views on the community. However, such occurrences should be noted and shown for what they are. We do have our own very strong views and stances, those that are very different than these. Share the news. You form your opinions. We do not tell you what to think or believe. So, oh yeah, the Asa True Folk Assembly. Yep. Today we are bombarded with confusion and messages contrary to our values of our ancestors and our folk. The FA would make it clear that we believe gender is not a social construct. It is a beautiful gift from the holy powers and from our ancestors. The FA celebrates our feminine ladies, our masculine gentlemen, above all our beautiful white children. Oh God, yep. The children of the folk are our shining future and the legacy of those all those men and women of our people back to the beginning. Hail the FA families now and always. Yep. I don't know if guys have ever heard of the True Folk Assembly, but they're reputedly pretty racist. And yeah, the white children is a ringer for that. So lovely. Okay, here, Flavel, the guy for the FA, has made his paganism political. He has taken his values from his religion based on the extensive research into the ancient culture and beliefs of his people and gods, and come to a cultural and political conclusion. And so many people decided to hate him for it. The Troth even published a statement saying that all are welcome in the face of what some have interpreted as a cis-normative attack on trans people. And that's a problem, in ancient, Scandinavia, they wouldn't really have had very much of an idea or any understanding about trans people, for the most part, for most of human history. If you were a woman, you were female, and you had specific gender roles, and likewise for a man. And this also goes into ancient Egypt. Gender roles were pretty separate for both men and women. And the problem with that is, do we really want to follow that particular part of our ancestors or our forebears' beliefs, or is it more ethical, or is it better to, follow something that's more contemporary? So sometimes what's ancient in the past doesn't always translate as very well in the modern day. And if you do that, well, I don't think that racism was part of uh you know of Asatru. No matter what the AFA might say, they probably didn't have a big problem with people from other areas of the globe. And the Vikings did a lot of trading with people. But yeah, people with the AFA, when you try and create this idea of what the ancients were supposed to be, it becomes a big problem, because you're often inserting your politics on the politics and beliefs of the past. Okay. It's good. So it's good when they do it, but it's bad when he does it. Yeah, exactly. It's like, so it's bad when the Christians do it, but it's good when you do it. Exactly. Flavel's paganism in that moment is as political as Thompson's, for example. Thompson's takes the belief that one should fight against injustice and to aid the poor, and decides Marxism is the solution. Flavel takes the beliefs that men should be manly, women should be womanly, and decides that men should be manly and women should be womanly, and there's not really any place for manly women or womanly men. I'll be honest. Flavel has the stronger case when it comes to political position derived from pagan religion. If you study the old Germanic and Norse stuff, yeah, men were supposed to be manly, women were supposed to be womanly, and any man who took it in the in the butt or lived as if he was a woman was a man who was going to be publicly humiliated until he either obeyed cultural norms or died. If you look at the myths of Thompson's religion, however, one will not typically find arguments for wealth distribution or the abolition of social hierarchies. I cannot talk. And likewise, you would not find that in ancient Egypt either. They did have a class strata that was heavily protected and brought or upheld by the religion, or at least the social teachings, if you've looked at like the instructions of Ptahhotep and whatnot. Am I saying it's absolutely wrong to make the political pagan, or have your paganism be political? No. If you want to do it, that's fine, but it is very much a Pandora's box. A lot of the hate GNR have gotten off, or has gotten started off when they complained about the pagan being political, when that politics was alt-right, but it was suddenly supposed to be good when the politics was progressive left Marxist. But both are political paganism. Both are politics informed by paganism, and paganism shaped by politics. And the fact that you often could have a stronger argument for the right in most paganisms than the left is something I see most left-leaning pagans who insist on their paganism being political tend to ignore. And I think that's why so many political pagan writers have attacked alt-right and even neutral pagan writers and thinkers. Yeah, definitely. Especially, people who are more centrist. Because the evidence shows that the Marxist pagans aren't really keeping with any of the actual tenets that their gods and goddesses put forth, at least not as well as the alt-right folks do. I'm apolitical because it's easier in some ways to be apolitical. My faith and my politics separated means I can keep my faith to the gods pure, untainted by political ideologies that might wish to try and use the gods for my political end. It also means that I can keep my politics pure of religious obligations, thereby allowing me to see politically what is best for all peoples of my nation and the nation itself, regardless of religious dogma. And I think that's pretty important, because there are so many, especially like in Western countries where, we have like things like the First Amendment or freedom of religion in general, is that people's values and religious beliefs are going to be different. It's going to run the whole kind of gambit, and we have to put some of our religious beliefs aside when we want to take a look at what's best for everybody, because what we think is best may not be what other people think is best, especially if they're a different religion. Um, just like with, like, abortion. Using that example again, I don't know why. Um, a lot of people on the pagan side, think abortion is okay, especially like early terms abortion, whereas a Christian might not. And how are we going to find a compromise or make a decision as to what's the best thing to do for people? I mean, if we allow all abortions all across the board, regardless of, what the circumstances surrounding the unwanted pregnancy, is that really the best thing? Will that help the most amount of people? Should Christians have to pay in terms of like taxpayer dollars for that sort of thing, or should they have the freedom to opt out or kind of push back against that, or should we have some kind of compromise where maybe no side is completely happy, but there are some kind of givings that each side can be relatively happy with, that sort of thing. But I'll be honest, I'm sure my heathen readers would be aghast at me saying this, but if my politics and my religion became one, being a heathen, well, our political religion probably wouldn't be that visibly different from, say, ISIS or Daesh. I don't like using ISIS. We'd be violent. We'd be carving our nation state out with the blood of our enemies. You'd see the bodies of our foes hanging from trees as offerings to Odin so that he might grant us victory in battle. There probably wouldn't be a lot of trans or rights or gay rights because those behaviors were considered degenerate under the old religious view. There would be clearly defined gender roles, and while there would be an amazing amount of gender equality, those roles would be pretty damn concrete. The list goes on and on. The same goes for if the Roman cultists went political, or the Cometics, or any pagan religion for that matter. The entire goal politically could be to place the gods in a position of absolute supremacy over society. I could see that definitely with Cometics, especially in terms of having a Nisut or Pharaoh. All laws would be religious laws. The culture and its norms would be the culture and norms that the gods had dictated, which would mean cultures and norms from thousands of years ago. You can bet that there's a lot of people who would not end up on the happy end of that stick. And that is a reality I accept about political paganism. And I know it's the reality because it's the exact same reality I see talked about so much from pagans whose paganism is political. It's always des Wort. God wills. Make it so at all costs. It's what happened with when the Christian is political, inquisitions, crusades, etc. It happens when Islam is political, jihads, terrorism. The instant you start saying the religious is political, then the political becomes religious, and with all the obligations of religious duty enforced on both political beliefs and action. And any failure to enforce this religious politicalism then becomes an absolute moral failing if you do not do it. Maybe this is why we see some of the vitriol coming from like the progressive leftists and pagan circles, because so much of the time they're like, if you do something and they say, oh, well, that's kind of racist, you should stop doing it, and it's like, I've seen people, refuse to capitulate, and then they get all angry and stuff. Well, for them, they keep saying, oh, racism is prejudice plus power. It's not necessarily a bad thing if you are racist. You just have to learn. And, the thing that gets me is like, well, why do these people go, ape crazy, ape shit when somebody refuses to capitulate and, quote unquote, not be racist? Because, despite them saying, oh, you're not a bad person, you're just ignorant, then, if somebody doesn't capitulate, then they're being morally deficient. So it's like, well, don't say that, it's not a bad thing and then act that way, because of course you think it is bad. Of course you think it is a moral failing and that person is evil. So be consistent. For me, it is not inconceivable that my paganism become political. I have conceived the idea, and I know what it means. It means enforcing my religion politically with all the fury and power I can muster. It means removing anyone who stands in the way. It means becoming an enemy to all mankind, because all mankind is now my enemy if they do not submit to the will of my gods. That kind of sounds like the really fundamentalist kind of Islam. And that could be arguable with some pagan traditions. I mean, for the ancient Egyptians, they thought that war was a gift to the gods because Egypt was showing its might, and they were bringing back booty from, the various areas that they were subjugating. So, I'm not sure. I'm pretty sure that nobody wants to bring any of that back. And I'm going on. And that's a terrible way to function politically. It's not even that good of a way to function religiously. So I keep them apart. It's something I recommend others consider strongly, because the more people push for the pagan to be political, the more it will happen. And it's probably not going to be the politics they want. Well, I imagine if they're, actually consistent with their beliefs, but so much of the time people are not. But in any case, hopefully this is just food for thought. Read both sides, make your own determinations, and let's start a discussion. I think it might be fun. If it doesn't blow up in my face, God's willing. So have a good one. Thank you, and Senepti.